Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, so much for being here, for providing this information. My first question I will ask, I think I will ask Mr. Hammond. I'm interested because you did mention brand stretching. So the way I understand it, C45 does allow for some room for some brand stretching. So that would mean having some names or brand names or logos that would be on products like, I don't know, like T-shirts or iPhone cases and things like that. I'm familiar with how, it is more restrictive in S5, for example. So I want to have your perspective on if it should be stricter in terms of brand stretching for cannabis products.
Thanks for your question. And I apologize that I haven't read it recently. My understanding of the brand stretching is that it would allow some branding on cannabis-related paraphernalia, but not in a way that would cross over into lifestyle branding. What we've seen is some companies bringing out cannabis-flavored products now so they can start to build some brand identity, which would then carry over when they can't use that on the packaging. So the general rule is that you need to restrict brand stretching if you want to restrict youth promotion and lifestyle advertising. So we've had several decades of tobacco companies doing clothing lines, doing concert, bar evenings, things that reach more than just adults alone. So as a general rule, I think that would sort of violate the spirit of the act. And I think it makes sense to allow some branding on cannabis product related paraphernalia, but probably not much beyond that.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wanted to answer that.
To that? No? Okay. You still
time,
got more time for another question.
Thank you. Maybe then I will continue. I'm not sure who would want to answer to that, but I'm interested in how, if we want to restrict promotion to consumer, should we also try and restrict promotion to retailers? Because I believe that it is possible to do that as well in terms of incentives of, So how important is it to provide access to a regulated product versus to help grow a market? So I'm looking at everybody because I don't know, Mr. Engel, if you want to answer that.
Sure, thanks, Senator Petitclerc. So I think two key points to consider. One is that the majority of provinces have gone with an age-gated approach for the retail environment. So I think that's critical in terms of ensuring that people that are entering a retail environment in most provinces will have ID checks and will not know the use or no one underage of majority in that province will be allowed in. So I think what happens in the retail environment, you've already predisposed that person to going in and having an interest. So I think that's critical. I think the second thing to consider in terms of that environment and the whole kind of communication that happens is it depends on the structure, to be honest, right? And I think, from Ontario through to Atlantic Canada, other than Newfoundland, will be provincially run retail locations, right? And I think we will see, in general, more controls in that structure than in the private retailers in Western Canada. Not to say that there won't be the same restrictions, but each province will have its own infrastructure. So I think your point is well taken in terms of making sure that if information is allowable, education is allowable in the retail environment, making sure that it's appropriate. And I think that's one of the key aspects. But it will vary by region, certainly. So.
Thank you. Do I still have a
little bit of time?
A little bit of time. Maybe, Madame Forêt. Some organizations have mentioned that in terms of those messages, the awareness messages, there is not one that specifically address secondary smoke of cannabis. And so it's a little time I have, so maybe a quick answer. Would that be relevant to specify the specific risk of smoking in those, the one that you have on the package, the awareness messages?
I'm going to say that the health warnings aspect of things is maybe a little bit outside of my area of expertise. Maybe that's one that Dr. Hammond would like to field.
Maybe.
Or Dr.
Look, I think I think you've pointed out a very important issue, which is that there is excess risk to smoke to the direct user and to users around them. And part of what we can try and do is educate people. Now, one of the 6 warnings references toxic chemicals in smoke, but that should probably be more prominent. People should know that they can reduce the risk if they do not take their drugs with smoke. And that is independent of any drug. That's why we have a vaping act that talks about vapor and nicotine and not smoke and nicotine. So I think you've highlighted a very important issue, and whether it's on a warning or another educational campaign, Canadians should know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jumping in real quick, there is some recent research that shows passive smoke exposure for marijuana in children. Actually, children can absorb it, and it can be detectable in their bloodstream. And in a small subset of populations studied in our emergency department, they were at increased risk for respiratory sensitive conditions, so asthma exacerbations, viral respiratory illnesses, ear infections, so similar things to cigarette smoke. And so that's starting to come out, and that's, I think, a very important future issue going forward.
Thank you.